How about Ethan? That's the one I always forget myself, Ethan. So, so the Psalms were the songs. It was the songbook, and I guess you could say still is for the Hebrews. And the Psalms had a lot of different meaning. So if you look at one psalm, it might have had one purpose, another psalm had another purpose. It runs the whole gamut of what you can think of. Some are praising the Lord and thanking Him for what He's done. Some are asking for help in times of trouble, when they were enslaved in some cases in Babylonian slavery. There's other ones, we'll see a little bit more about that today, when David was on the run for his life. Some of that time was when he was the king, selected as a king, but not yet the king. And so he was fleeing from Saul, King Saul, and one of those was about being in a cave, so we'll see that today probably. And then there's another one where he was running for his life, and that was when his son, who was his son that was after him? Absalom. Absalom was after him to kill him, and it was a rebellion. And so that's addressed in the Psalms as well. So we know that there's, excuse me, there's 5 books of the Psalms. Book 1 is Psalms 1 to 41, and that more or less corresponds to Genesis. There's the book 2, which is Psalms 42 to 72, and that corresponds to Exodus. There's book 3, which is 73 to 89. We did that too. That's corresponding to Leviticus. And then for book 4, we finished recently, that corresponds to Numbers. And then now, book 5, we are looking at something that corresponds to Deuteronomy. So that's how it all lines up with the books of the Bible, also called the law, that was ascribed to Moses as the human author. And Moses wrote Deuteronomy just before his death around 1405 BC. So that was obviously a long period of time that it covers. And today we are covering Psalms 139 to 144. We only have 145 to 150 left for next week, and then we're done. So we'll be quickly out of that. One thing we've been doing is you all have been sharing your favorite psalms and hymns, and it's been a real blessing for all of you that did share. I don't know if there's anybody else that still wanted to do that, but if you do, let me know. We're running out of time. We only have one more week, so not much time left, but think about that, and we'll go back to that. Okay, so the Psalms we're studying today were written by David. There's many aspects that are picked out and highlighted. Is God our creator? Of course God is our creator. Is God the one true God? Yes. Does God love us? Yes, again. Is God all-knowing or omniscient? Yes, again. There's so many things we need to learn and then remember about God. There's so many things in the Bible that it's overwhelming to try to think about it all at the same time. But that's why we study it, so we can remember all these different aspects. Sometimes when you hear a psalm or a song the first time, you're just kind of trying to figure out what it says and what it means and what's behind it. But the psalms that we see here in the Bible have been read so many times and actually sang or chanted so many times that they're very familiar to the Hebrews. And this was truly their songbook that they used to go back to over and over again. We looked at the songs of ascent, which were the songs that they sang when they were on their way for the Jewish traditions of going back to Jerusalem for the different feasts. And they would sing those on the way. And so it was almost like a songbook inside of a songbook for those. And we went through those and finished those last week. As children of God, we can't allow ourselves to take God for granted or assume that we deserve His love and grace. If we're not careful, we can find ourselves going through the motions in our singing. We sing a familiar song, we just say, okay, I'm singing. I know this one, I got it memorized already. but do we really think about the words and the meaning of it? And so that's what can help us with our worship, help us to understand the messages that are there. Our minds can wander on to other things, and it's better if we can try to focus and try to think about what it actually says, and the way we do our songs with our preparation for our services is to help us get in the right mindset before we study, before we do Sunday school, and before we have a sermon. So it's really to help us get into the place where we can have our mind clear of other things so we can do a better job of studying. And today we're going to learn more about God's traits. And the more we understand about God, the more we can appreciate Him, we can trust Him, and we can follow Him. If we know what God's all about, if we know what God's, all of His characteristics and things that He is, then we will really understand the place that He should have in our life. Okay, so we're going to start with Psalm 139, and these are a little bit longer. You guys all got a break because we had some really short ones. As far as the readings go, 141 and 142 are a little shorter. This one, 139, is, 24 verses. So what if we split this up into two? If someone could read the first 12, and then after that someone could read 13 to 24. This is in Psalms 139. Thank you, Brother Jim. Thank you, Sister Joanne. It was one of your favorites. Awesome. So Brother Jim at the beginning read the part to the chief musician, a Psalm of David, and that's part of the Bible. So that's not a common. That's what I was just saying. I don't know. I wasn't disagreeing with you, but yeah, no, good, good, good. No, what I was saying is it is part of the Bible. So yeah, you're right. You're right. When we read it, or when we, yes, and so it's written there for us to understand who wrote it and from what perspective it was written. And if you know that it was David and you know what David went through and you studied about David, then it's pretty easy to associate with some of his experiences, some of the big experiences that he had in his life. And we studied that recently, so I think it was helpful to do this study in Psalms after we recently did that in Chronicles and Kings. And so, yes, and David was also a musician. He was very talented. He wrote many of the Psalms himself. If you look at some of the things that happened in the Bible that we've studied, when they took the Ark of the Covenant from where it was and they moved it, they sang songs. The whole country sang songs when they did that. They all made it a celebration. And when they set up Jerusalem as the capital city, same thing. And so this was not a once in a while thing. This was an all the time thing. But for special celebrations, it was even more of a thing. So uh, songs and psalms were part of worship, uh, very much so for David, and we see it all throughout when he was king, where it comes up over and over again. Sometimes you see even some of the instruments that were used to play the psalms. That isn't. I don't know. I don't know what you call these few words. If you call it the preamble or the intro or whatever you call it, but there is good information there about setting the context of the psalm that we're studying. And so this one talks about, "O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me." And then it gets into some details, and there are many aspects of God. This focuses on some of the eternal ones. For one, he is omniscient, all-knowing. Do we know anyone that's all-knowing? Okay, anybody else? We don't know anybody, right? All-knowing. That there's a lot to know. So it's really beyond our comprehension to think that God knows everything. And so in that case, if God knows everything, then what does He need us for? Right. He doesn't. He doesn't need us to do anything, do whatever He wants to do. But exactly, He loves us, even though we don't deserve His love. He loves us. He wants us to praise Him, to worship Him, to give Him the credit for the things that He's done. He wants us to help other people. He wants us to follow His will, which is laid out so many different places in the Bible. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. 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 Hmm. Right. And we always have a choice on how we handle that, right? So when we have things that overwhelm us or overcome us or things we have to deal with, we can ask for the Lord's help and we can trust in the Lord to take care of us, or we can do the exact opposite of that, right? We can try to take care of it ourselves. We can worry about it. Uh, my mother-in-law and I used to trade stories of worrying about things. I would mention to her she was a worrier, and she would mention to me that I'm a worrier, and we were both right, unfortunately. And so, but the Lord doesn't want that. The Lord wants us to have peace. We've kind of seen it over and over again. But the peace comes from trusting in the Lord and not trying to take control of things. And when we try to take control, that's when we start getting on the wrong track. And so that's where we need to make sure the Lord is in it, whatever we're doing. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You absolutely can. And I know David did, right? I mean, David wrote it, and David wrote it for his own comfort. But then David also shared all of this with the people around him, even with the whole country. And so it's not just for, even though it talks about David and David's the one writing it, but he's trying to help everyone to think of things a little bit differently. And when you think this is uh, thousands of years ago, and David had a pretty good handle on this, which is great. The Lord blessed him with the knowledge of things like this. Uh, it's great. Another one is God is omnipresent. That's mentioned here too. So God's everywhere at the same time. So how do you do that? Yeah. Sometimes I thought my mom was everywhere in the same time because she figured out everything. It's like I didn't say anything, and I know my brother didn't say anything, but somehow she figured out what happened. So after a while, you figure out that the moms talk to each other and all that stuff, and you sort of figure out the network of communication that happens. But God does know everything, and He's everywhere at the same time. So there's nothing we can hide from the Lord. So if we're happy, if we're sad, if we're bitter, if we're angry, whatever it is, the Lord knows about it. And if you look at the things in the Bible, it's all throughout people dealing with those situations. Some dealt with it the right way. A lot of times they didn't deal with it the right way, and we saw what happened. It's a great resource for us to study and to learn. Another one is that God is all powerful. So what does that mean? Who else do we know that's all powerful? Nobody. Nobody. So so when it says he's omnipotent, he has all the power. So when we see somebody today that has the power, where did they get it from? The Lord let them have it, right? They didn't have it. The Lord didn't let them have it. Didn't necessarily mean that they deserved it, but the Lord let them have it. And so we don't even know the reason sometimes. It's not for us to figure out the Lord's will in every situation, but we do know that it's provided by our God, and there is only one true God. Idolatry is mentioned in different places, and from my perspective, I thought, wow, this is a lot of places idolatry is mentioned. We don't have as much problem with that, but we do have a problem with that because we don't necessarily make a statue and stick it in our front yard and pray to it every day, but it's where do you put your trust and where do you put your time? And sometimes our idols are ourselves, right? Where we put too much time and effort in focusing on ourselves and we don't focus on the right things. And so there's only one true God, and there's no other being in the universe like Him. And David here is pointing it out so we can all remember and recognize that and not forget, because if we don't think about it, we'll forget about it. And so it's great that he tells us about it. He talks about here in the beginning about searching. The Lord searched me and known me. And so the searching here is not searching like I'm looking for, I don't know, my seat over there. It's not like that. It's like looking for something that's harder to find. And so it kind of made me think about those people that walk on the beach where they got the metal detector and they're walking around and it just looks like smooth sand out there. And they're walking around, swinging that thing, who knows how long. And then pretty soon you realize that by using that, they can find things you can't see. And so that's why they're spending time doing it. They can find rings or watches or necklaces or car keys or whatever. But if it wasn't worth their time, they wouldn't be doing it. And so the Lord sees things that we can't see easily. He sees all of that stuff and so much more. How much searching do you have to do to find something? Usually it takes a dedication and a commitment to be successful when you're searching. People like looking for gold is another example. But the Lord searches and he sees things we can't see. He sees them very easily. If you look at the example of when Samuel was searching for a successor to King Saul, he was looking everywhere, and he was looking to pick the firstborn son of Jesse. He was tall and good looking, very similar to Saul. Samuel was focused on what he could see, the outward appearance, but God searched and saw David and saw what was on the inside. And so you recall the situation, Samuel said, "Are there any more sons?" "Oh yeah, well, we got David, he's out in the field, he's, with the sheep and all that stuff. And do you really want me to go get him?" That was the one that the Lord selected. And so he would have been overlooked. He would have been passed over by just a casual person, but the Lord knows what was inside of David. He knew what his characteristics and his traits were. From what David said here, he knew him pretty much forever, before he was born, while he was being formed, and then after. And so God knows all of those things, and he knew that he would be a more capable leader for the Hebrews, more than anybody did. Even Samuel was following the Lord's will. Even he didn't understand exactly at that point, for sure. So the Lord can see what's inside, and which is fantastic. God is omnipresent. That means all places at the same time. So if you pulled out a map and said, "Where's God?" Everywhere on the whole map at the same time. You think about that. We can have maps of the world, maps of our city, maps of the universe. God's in even more places than that. It's hard for us to understand how that all works. We're here at Brookside Missionary Baptist Church. Is God here? He's here. Is there anything we're going to do here that God won't see or know what it is? No, not at all. We can be in an aircraft over the Pacific Ocean. I did some traveling like that. And you look at the little map that they have on the screen, it says, "Here's where you are," and there's pretty much nothing below where you are. God knows where you are. It's amazing. We could be inside the International Space Station, not even on this earth, and the Lord knows we're up there and what we're doing. It doesn't matter where we go or what we do. There's no place that we can go. We can find ourselves in a strange place. We could be in a submarine that could go to the bottom of the ocean. God's still with us. We can find ourselves in a strange place, and the Holy Spirit may say, "Get out of here right now." I have definitely had that feeling. It kind of starts out sometimes with a hair going up on the back of my neck, and it's like, I don't know who's telling me this, but we need to go do something else, like right away. I've had that feeling for sure, because God can see things we can't see. What about in the grave? God can see us there. What about in our mother's womb? This is what David's talking about. David knew that the Lord could see him way before anybody else would even, and even today, give credit that there's even life there. We go to the doctor and they show a test, ultrasound. Our pastor here has done that for sure, where they've gone and looked at the ultrasound pictures and all that stuff, and you say, "Well, there's a baby there." Well, that's one picture, but God doesn't have a picture. He knows everything. So when you get a picture, it's just one perspective of looking at something, and there's useful information there, but God has all the perspectives of it. And so God knows everything. So he knows about Benaiah. Benaiah's already here. We know about Benaiah. But then you've got a daughter coming, and we know a little bit about your daughter, but not a lot. So, where we don't know much about it, the Lord definitely does. At the same time. Yeah. So that's hard to imagine. In our lifetime, we've really been blessed whether we see the change in technology. I mean, when I was growing up, you took the two uh, vegetable cans and you put a little wire in between them, and you listen and you can hear your friend over there talking. You think, man, this is really cool. You think you really got something going there, especially if they go a little bit farther away where you can't really hear what they're saying. You got a little club and you build a little fort out of little pieces of wood you all put together and all that stuff, and you have members and people that can't be let in and all that stuff. Uh, but we're so much far beyond that. Uh, but it's nowhere near even close to what God's capabilities are. I mean, we look at communication, what we can do today, it's nothing compared to God. God created everything we see. He created life itself. It's so far beyond our understanding. David had the hand of God on his life. From what we know, it was the case for his whole life. People are not a collection of random molecules that attribute our very existence to some monumental Big Bang explosion, something like that. I've been very fortunate to work with engineers a lot, and I can tell you, nothing happens accidentally. If it's going to work, it didn't work because it happened accidentally. It worked because there's a lot of time and effort and focus and all that. And that's on things that are so much less complex than we actually are. Toward the end of this, David talks about the judgment of the wicked. He was not against it. If you look at David, David was chased, and they tried to kill him very much of his life. And when Saul was against him, when he threw the javelin at him, he's like, we got to go take out David. Then pretty much every single bounty hunter, everybody you could think of, was after David. And they set up traps for him. They set up different situations. They knew where he liked to go. They knew his family was. And somehow David was able to evade all of that. And the only way he was way to do it was with God's help. And so here we see in verses 19 through 24 that he agreed with punishing those that were not only wicked in their actions, but wicked in their thoughts as well. He was grieved that anyone would fight against God and God's purposes. And so we look at some of the countries they fought against. They pretty much won every single time when they fought against them. He was angry. David was angry with those that took actions that opposed God. If they were God's enemies, they were also David's enemies. David asked God to judge him and decide whether he was telling the truth. For us, it should be our desire to follow the righteous path that God has laid out for us. And so I have really learned from studying Psalms that I do not communicate with the Lord nearly enough. I think, oh, I'm going to pray, and that's going to take care of things, and it's going to be fine. But then something's on my mind the whole rest of the day, and now I'm thinking, I could be praying those other times. That would be a better use of my time to trust in the Lord, to ask for his help, to ask for what we want, let his will be done, but ask for what we think we need. And don't worry about it. We've had a lot of potentially worrisome things lately, and in the past, we've had layoffs at work, and in the past I would have not slept. That would have been the thing I would have done, just thinking and all the stuff. But you can say this, Darla, have I been sleeping? Because I've been leaving it to the Lord, saying, Lord, just take over the situation. Whatever the outcome is, we're good with it. And so we've been blessed again. We don't deserve the blessings, but God most certainly blessed us. And now really trying to focus on how I can help some of my coworkers that are impacted by it. So anyway, God helps us so much. Okay, so now we're on 140. So, yes. Sure. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like vengeance, revenge. It's not. What David is talking about is not uh, his wrath against wicked men, because he himself was a wicked individual. Throughout his life, he committed many terrible things. He was talking about aligning with God's righteousness and not self-vengeance. I just wanted.
Yeah, thanks, Brother Mike. So a lot of good things there, because when we read this, does it come across that David's a king? When we read this psalm we just read, not any. Well, you don't have to be king. Just think of any politician that you may have talked to or know or whatever. Even in our recent elections, when people talk about it, they don't talk like this. They don't talk about the power of God and how they're leaning on God and get into all these many details about it. And on this thing about judgment, yeah, he's taking it to God. David was a warrior. He was known as a warrior king, and pretty much if David came after you, you were in trouble, because everybody knew that not only was you're fighting David, you're fighting God also. And so this is David uh, speaking with God about it, not to say that he's taking it into his own hands, but uh, he's basically saying, I'm tired of these wicked people. I know you are too. And so, are your purposes not going to be done because of these wicked people? I think that's kind of what he's saying. And we see other places where he says, we'll study about it even today. Places where David will say, let their traps catch themselves. For those that try to capture me or God's people or thwart our purposes, let them be caught in their own traps. Let them be confounded rather than being successful. Okay, so we have Psalm 140. It's only 13, so we might need 4 or 5 people. No, just one. I'm joking. Just one person. If somebody wants to read 140.
Surely the righteous shall give thanks to thy name. Their upright shall dwell in thy presence.
Thank you, Sister Doris. So this one is also a Psalm of David. So this is David speaking. So what is David talking about in this psalm? Mm-hmm. So what is he praying then? Mm-hmm. So he's asking for the Lord to save him, He's asking for him to preserve him. And David gets into a lot of detail. I, I think about that more now than I used to. That when I pray in more detail about things. Lord, take care of the situation. Okay. Um, so what are you thinking? Here, it's pretty obvious what David is thinking. David sees the people that are coming after him are very capable people. These aren't just a ragtag group of people that are coming after him that don't really know what they're doing, random people. These are people that are effective in doing what they're trying to do, and David knows that, and he's trying to take it to the Lord to say, Lord, I need your help in this situation to overcome these people. These people are pretty serious in their convictions on what they're doing. They are wicked and they have wicked purposes. They set up snares for me everywhere. And Lord, please hear my voice of supplication. I'm asking for your help, for your salvation. And it's not like David's trying to come up with a master plan on how to figure out his own way to escape danger. This was a constant thing in David's life. It wasn't like, oh, we got, like, think about a movie. You know, in a movie, one big thing happens, it's over, okay, it's done. And then everybody in the movie retires or does something. This is not David's situation at all. David is facing this kind of thing all the time. People are coming after him all the time, day after day after day, year after year after year. And to be able to keep his focus on the Lord, trusting in the Lord, and facing these enemies all the time takes a huge amount of strength. Not strength that came from David himself. His strength was in trusting in the Lord. Over and over and over again, not only did he focus on the Lord, he had everybody else focus on the Lord. He wasn't a king that went into his closet and prayed to the Lord. He prayed to the Lord in front of everybody. He sang to the Lord in front of everybody. As an example, he was a role model for people. He expected them to do it also. In this particular situation, he sees all these folks coming after him, and we don't know the exact timing of this one. It could be when he was anointed as the king, but had not ascended to the throne, and Saul was trying to go after him. It seems like it might have been that time frame. So Saul had got the blessing, Saul had been blessed by God, but so was David. And so it was a difficult situation. David wasn't going to kill Saul. That would have been the wrong thing to do. And so even though he had plenty of opportunities to do it, he did not take it into his own hands. He trusted in God to take an active role in helping him. David did not lose his focus. He exalted God. At the same time, he asked for help in time of troubles. And so I think he trusted in God more than I've ever trusted in God. He trusted in for his life all the time. And the Lord provided for him in all those different situations. He provided a way for David to survive, to get away from the things that he was facing. He was talking about the evil man and the violent man as the way he described his enemies. The evil man was the one that was bringing calamity and adversity to him. We know that Saul was very well known for his violent outbursts. One of the ones that was pretty famous was when they were in a dinner, and Saul threw a javelin at him to try to kill him. And how would you escape that? Think about that. So you're with the king and all the king's top subjects, and the king throws a javelin at you, and somehow you mysteriously disappear. How can you do that? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being in the White House or being in the Capitol building or something like that happening, and you're more or less assaulted by the person that's running everything, and you get away? Is that unbelievable? That's just unbelievable to me. The Lord was definitely in it. God's blessings was upon David, and he was able to escape. They were scheming to kill David even after that, to set a trap for him where he couldn't escape. God always, every single time, provided him with a way out, every single time. And so the fact that we can have a difficult situation, it can be resolved. The next day, what happened? Got another difficult situation. It happens all the time. We have things coming at us from every direction, and the Lord knows about that. The Lord knows what we're going through. If we try to do it ourselves or come up with a plan on ourselves, usually we're not successful all the time. But if we give it to the Lord and trust Him, and let the Lord take care of it. We had a few things lately. Okay, let the Lord take care of it because I don't even have any idea what to do. And the Lord took care of it. And there's such peace when you give it to the Lord. And I know David, it seems like he didn't have peace all the time, but he had a lot more peace than he would have had otherwise, for sure. And some of the times he did, we read about some of those before. In verses 6 through 8, he talks about, "Thou art my God." That wasn't just a slogan or a bumper sticker or a phrase that people just recited over and over. This is what David believed. He believed that there's one true God, and he praised him, he sang to him, he worshiped him, and it was what David's life was about. It was an open acknowledgement, a public acknowledgement of the place God had in his life. And we saw that over and over again. He declared it freely and openly to anyone that was around him. He relied on God for the strength and power of salvation, not on himself. And he also prayed that God would not allow the desires of the wicked to be attained. Do not let their schemes and plots to be successful. And I don't think I've ever prayed exactly like that, but I can definitely see David's perspective here, and he's not taking it into his own hands. He's taking it to the Lord, which is the difference. Verses 9 to 13, let the mischief of their lips cover them. Let their plans backfire. Let them be so snarled up that they themselves become trapped. David even prayed that evil men would turn on each other. And I can imagine that. If there was a bounty on David's head and they saw that as money that they could have that nobody else could have, I could easily see people fighting against each other to be the one that caught David. And that by itself could potentially keep him from not being captured. Just the greediness of the people that were coming after him. God would bring good to those that were righteous. God would stand with those that are afflicted and in need. David had a permanent desire to be in the presence of the Lord. And so it wasn't anything that he took for granted. David most definitely sinned. He was a sinner. But as far as pointing us to the Lord, there are so many examples that we're seeing. It's a great example for us to look at and to understand and to think of ourselves in a similar situation and how we can ask for God's help also. So that takes us to 141. We're running out of time. There's so many things to cover. Brother Mike, I don't know how you did it. Brother Mike was a Sunday school teacher, and he made it look easy. It is not easy to get through all this material each Sunday that we've got to go through. But we go through the Bible in 10 years, and it seems like a long time, but it doesn't seem like a long time on Sunday morning. It seems like a short time to me. Would somebody like to read Psalm 141? Thank you, Brother Homer. So this is another Psalm of David, and we think what's happening in this situation, David is fleeing from his son Absalom. And the difference in this situation, David is not young. David is the ruling king, and this is where his son is looking to take over the nation. David is not in any condition to be running in this state that he's in. And so here he says, Lord, I cry unto thee, make haste unto me. And so sometimes we kind of jokingly say, Lord, I need your help and I need it now. We do say that. In this case, this is accurate. David did need help because people were literally right there ready to kill him and all those that were with him. And so he talked about his prayer being set forth before the Lord as incense and lifting up his hands as the evening sacrifice. Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, keep the door of my lips. So the first part of that, he's praying to the Lord. So things are bad. Things are bad in the country. His son is coming after him to assassinate him. It is bad. Most of us in a situation like this, if it was like somebody pulled the fire alarm at the office, who's going to be praying in that situation? I think if it's a real fire, people will be running for their lives probably, and maybe that's what we should do depending on the situation. But David is praying to the Lord for his help and for him to notice him that he needs help. And so this next one, set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, keep the door of my lips. Incline not my heart to any evil thing, to practice wicked works with men that work iniquity, and let them not eat of their dainties. So setting a watch, this is where he's asking the Lord for help in what he's saying. And so when you're a king, what part of what you say do people listen to? Everything. They listen to everything. What if you said something you're just upset and mad at somebody? They listen to that too. And if you're not careful, you'll say, I wish this, I wish that. And then next thing you know, somebody took that as a command to go do something, and it might be done. Well, I didn't exactly mean that. Well, you're the king. And so you can tell in this situation that David had thoughts about evil things, and he wanted the Lord to help him to manage himself, to not speak in an evil way, to not speak in a way that was not supportive of the Lord. If you look at his prayer is really a prayer for guidance. David had many flaws. His prayer included the need to be in line with God's purpose and plan. He wanted God to help him determine what he said and how he said it. So he knew that he had to be careful in what he said. He wanted God to bend his life away from evil thoughts and actions. Dainties is really talking about delicacies and luxuries of the world. The thought here was the way of the world would become so attractive to David that he would fall from following God's path. He prayed the world would not gain control of his thoughts. We see a time in David's life when this did happen, when he was at home in the palace when he should have been on the battlefield. He saw Bathsheba, and that temptation was enough for him to commit several sins. So he was contemplating the easy path here, and he didn't want to take the easy path. He wanted the Lord to help him, that he would take the right path. Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to pray something would happen to Absalom, that he didn't want to ask the Lord to do something to Absalom that's not in
Mm-hmm. Right. And later, we know that when Absalom was killed, David grieved for him. Even though Absalom was out to kill him, he still grieved for him, being his son. And so we see that a lot. So we are out of time already, believe it or not. If you want to do the rest of it, we can come back after lunch for another hour or so. But no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate everybody's participation. And next week is our last week of Psalms. So if you have hymns and psalms you'd like to talk to us about and you haven't had a chance to do that yet, it might be your last time next Sunday.